In 2006, Lori Vallow Daybell married businessman Charles Vallow. Friends say it appeared to be a happy marriage. Together, the couple was raising Paislee Ryan, Lori's daughter from a previous marriage. Lori and Charles Vallow adopted J.J. Vallow. He was the grandson of Charles' sister. J.J. had autism, and April Raymond, who was Lori's friend, says Lori was patient, an ideal mother for him. Vasia Itayahal met the Vallow family when they lived in Arizona. She says Paislee embraced her role as a big sister, that Paislee even jokingly referred to JJ as her own child. Sometime around 2017, relatives say Lori Vallow's relationship with her children changed. Her friends say she had been reading the books of doomsday author Chad Daybell. Daybell, who wrote several fiction books about preparing for the end of the world, lived outside Rexburg, Idaho. In 2019, Charles Vallow became very worried about Lori, and he went to the police with his concerns. He told them Lori believed she was a god preparing for the end of days. He also said Lori had threatened to murder him. Charles Vallow filed for a divorce from Lori. In court documents, Charles expressed that he feared for his and the children's safety. Charles Vallow went to the house where Lori Vallow was living with the children in Chandler, Arizona. Charles was supposed to drop their son JJ off at school, but when he went inside the home, Charles was shot dead by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Cox told police that Lori and Charles got into a fight. Alex claimed he was protecting his sister and shot Charles in self-defense. Lori and Paislee, who both say they heard the shooting, told similar stories of self-defense. Lori Vallow moved closer to Chad Daybell. She relocated her kids to Rexburg, Idaho. Lori's brother, Alex Cox, moved into the same apartment complex. Lori Vallow, Paislee, JJ, and Alex Cox went to Yellowstone National Park. Police say this is where the last known photo of Paislee was taken before she vanished. Melanie Gibb has said that Lori had referred to Paislee as a zombie. The morning after Paislee Ryan disappeared, investigators say that Alex Cox's cell phone GPS placed him in Chad Daybell's backyard, on the property for about 2 hours. About 14 minutes after Cox's GPS showed him leaving the property, Chad Daybell texted his wife, Tammy Daybell. The text read, "I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery." Police say J.J. Vallow was last seen on September 22, 2019. Melanie Gibbs says that she and her boyfriend David Warwick were staying with Lori Vallow in Rexburg that weekend. On the night of September 22nd, Warwick says he saw Alex Cox carry JJ into Lori's apartment. But the next morning, according to Warwick, when he asked to see JJ, Lori reportedly told them that JJ was being a zombie and that Cox had to take him away. The day after JJ was last seen, investigators say Alex Cox's cell phone showed that Cox returned to Chad Daybell's backyard. This time, Cox was there for only 17 minutes. With Lori Vallow's children's whereabouts unknown, tragedy struck Chad Daybell's family. Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, died. The couple's son, Garth Daybell, said Tammy died in bed and that he and Chad called 911. The Daybell children declined an autopsy. They say the coroner told them Tammy's death appeared to be natural causes. They believed that because they say their mom was in ill health prior to her death. Roughly 2 weeks later, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell got married on a beach in Hawaii. Later that month, JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, asked police to check on JJ's welfare. Woodcock said she was concerned and hadn't heard from JJ in months. Rexburg police went to Lori Vallow Daybell's house, looking for JJ. Police say Vallow Daybell lied to them, claiming that JJ was safe and staying in Arizona with her friend, Melanie Gibb. At first, Gibb wasn't forthcoming about JJ's whereabouts, but later called police and told them JJ hadn't been with her. While Rexburg police attempted to locate JJ, investigators soon realized that his sister, Paislee Ryan, was also missing and launched a nationwide search for the children. While investigators searched for the missing children, Lori and Chad Daybell traveled back to Hawaii. In December 2019, Fremont County Sheriff's investigators grew suspicious about Tammy Daybell's death. They exhumed her body to conduct an autopsy. That same month, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, died in Arizona. It was determined he died of natural causes. Authorities served Lori Vallow Daybell an order requiring her to produce her children. After failing to comply, Lori Vallow Daybell was arrested in Hawaii. 2 weeks later, she was extradited to Idaho. Even after Vallow Daybell's arrest, the couple refused to say where the children were. On June 9, 2020, the FBI Rexburg Police and Fremont County Sheriff's Office descended upon Chad Daybell's home and property. Authorities dug in areas of the backyard where Alex Cox's cell phone had pinged in September 2019. Tragically, they uncovered human remains buried in shallow graves. JJ Vallow had been buried under a tree, and about 50 yards away, investigators found Paislee's grave in the Daybell's pet cemetery. Prosecutors believe she was buried in the same location Chad Daybell referenced when he texted Tammy Daybell 9 months earlier, saying he was burying a raccoon. Investigators dug up part of the pet cemetery and found no raccoon. But Daybell's family stated there was a second pet cemetery on the property that was not searched. Chad Daybell was arrested. Authorities later confirmed that they identified the remains as JJ Vallow and Paislee Ryan. A memorial was built along the Daybell's fence to honor the victims. In May 2021, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell were charged with first-degree murder for the deaths of JJ and Paislee. Daybell was also charged with murdering his first wife, Tammy Daybell. Chad Daybell pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Lori Vallow Daybell was also charged with conspiring to murder Charles Vallow. That same month, a judge ruled Lori incompetent to stand trial while she receives mental health treatment. She had not yet entered a plea. Her case was on hold. In August 2021, prosecutors announced they will seek the death penalty against Chad Daybell. Daybell is jailed, awaiting trial. Chad and Tammy Daybell's children said they believe their father is innocent. Daybell's daughter, Emma Murray, says she believes Chad was framed by Alex Cox and Lori Vallow Daybell. In April 2022, Judge Stephen Boyce ruled Lori Vallow Daybell is now mentally competent to stand trial in the Idaho murder case. He did not provide other details about her treatment or mental condition. She is scheduled to be formally arraigned in court next week, and both Lori and Chad Daybell are set to stand trial together early next year. Lori Vallow Daybell refused to enter a plea to murder and other charges, prompting Judge Stephen Boyce to enter a not guilty plea on her behalf. Vallow Daybell and her husband, Chad Daybell, were both at the courthouse in the eastern Idaho town of St. Anthony for court proceedings. Vallow Daybell for an arraignment that was delayed for months while she underwent treatment at a mental health facility, and Chad Daybell for a hearing over the trial venue. Lori Vallow Daybell will qualify for capital punishment if she is convicted at her trial in May 2022, because the slayings were exceptionally depraved and carried out for financial gain, according to court documents filed by prosecuting attorneys from Fremont and Madison counties on May 2nd. Attorneys for Lori Vallow Daybell asked a judge to send the case back to a grand jury because they say that the conspiracy charges are oddly constructed and could confuse a jury. Daybell and her husband Chad Daybell have pleaded not guilty to murder, conspiracy, and grand theft charges in connection with the deaths of 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow and 17-year-old Paislee Ryan. 7th District Judge Stephen Boyce has banned cameras from the courtroom in the criminal case of Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell, saying he fears the images could prevent a fair trial. In January 2023, Judge Stephen Boyce rejected a request from Lori Vallow, Daybell's attorneys, that she and her husband be allowed to meet in person and on the phone to discuss strategies and settlement options. Attorneys for Vallow, Daybell, and Chad Daybell presented several requests during a motion hearing, including that the trial be delayed until 2024, a request from Chad Daybell's attorneys, and that the death penalty be taken off the table, a request from Lori Vallow, Daybell's lawyers. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty for both defendants, but Lori Vallow, Daybell's attorneys said it should be taken off the table in her case because they will not have time to fully review a large amount of evidence that was turned over in recent weeks. During a hearing, Judge Stephen Boyce agreed. He noted that Vallow Daybell has not waived her right to a speedy trial, so the proceeding could not be rescheduled to give her defense team ample time to review the evidence. The death penalty still applies to Chad Daybell's case. Attorneys began selecting 18 potential jurors for the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell, charged in what prosecutors say was a doomsday-focused plot. Authorities summoned 1,800 potential jurors to the courthouse in late March of 2023, requiring each of them to complete a 20-page questionnaire in hopes of winnowing out anyone unable to fairly try the case. Ultimately, 12 jurors and 6 alternates are hearing the case. On April 10th, the prosecution and defense in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell made their opening arguments to a jury in Boise, Idaho. An Idaho jury found Lori Vallow Daybell, the mom charged with murder in the deaths of 2 of her children, 16-year-old Paislee Ryan and 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow, guilty on all charges. Vallow Daybell, 49, was also charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the deaths of the children and the death of her husband's first wife, Tammy Daybell. She was also accused of stealing Social Security payments issued for the children. Chad Daybell will face trial nearly a year after his wife. Judge Stephen Boyce, who is overseeing both cases, set his trial date for April 1, 2024. He too will be tried at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Idaho. I will make sure I give an update about him. Lori Vallow Daybell was sentenced to life without parole, the maximum penalty on the charges of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was also given a 10-year sentence for grand theft, as well as ordered to pay more than $50,000, including fines, a civil penalty for each of the 3 victims, and restitution. You had so many other options. You could have gotten divorced. You could have found someone else to take care of those kids. And as the state was able to prove at trial, you chose the most evil and destructive path possible, said Judge Stephen Boyce at the sentencing. He added, "You justified all of this by going down a bizarre religious rabbit hole, and clearly you are still down there." Lori Vallow Daybell was charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the 2019 death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, who died after police say he was shot by her brother, Alexander Lamar Cox. Cox claimed he shot Vallow in self-defense. Daybell and Cox, who also died in 2019, were also accused of trying to murder her niece's husband, Brandon Boudreaux, who was shot at in 2019 while driving near his home. She also faces a charge of conspiracy to commit murder in that case. Boudreaux was unhurt in the incident. The court entered pleas of not guilty for Daybell on both charges. The murder of Cari Farver is one of the most chilling and bizarre true crime cases in modern American history. The 37-year-old woman from Iowa started a whirlwind romance with Dave Krupa of Omaha, Nebraska in October 2012, and 2 weeks later, she vanished, never to be seen again. Krupa, however, had nothing to do with her mysterious disappearance. Farver was abducted and murdered by Shanna Liz Golyar, a woman Krupa had been casually dating before he met Farver. For the next 3 years, Golyar posed as Farver, sending thousands of text messages and emails to Krupa and Farver's family members. She even sent threatening messages to herself so that Krupa wouldn't catch on to her act. Because the texts and emails were coming from Farver's accounts, it wasn't until 2015 that authorities really started looking into her disappearance. As they began investigating Golyar, they learned the entire ruse went much deeper than anyone could have ever imagined. In 2012, Dave Krupa was working at an auto repair shop in Omaha, Nebraska. At the time, he was hoping for a fresh start in life. He'd just split up with his longtime girlfriend, Amy Flora, with whom he shared 2 children. He soon decided to sign up for an online dating site, where he met Liz Golyar. The two began seeing each other, but before things could get too deep, Krupa reportedly informed Golyar that he wasn't looking for anything serious. Golyar, a single mother, was happy with that arrangement, or so she claimed. Several months after meeting Golyar, Krupa spotted Cari Farver when she walked into his shop. He immediately knew there was something special about her. When we looked at each other, there was a little spark, Krupa later stated. She's showing me something inside the vehicle, and we're standing there, and we're very close, and there was some tension. Krupa asked Farver out on a date, where they discussed that neither of them was looking for an exclusive relationship. The two returned to his apartment, and as Farver was leaving later, she passed a woman in the hallway. It was Golyar, who had dropped by unannounced to pick up some of her things. It was this chance meeting, a meeting that couldn't have lasted more than a few seconds, that would change the course of both women's lives. Within weeks of meeting Farver, Dave Krupa was beginning to rethink his commitment to bachelorhood. Farver still wanted to keep things casual, but she did agree to stay with him for a few nights in November 2012. She was working on a major project for her job, and Krupa's apartment was much closer to her office than her home was. The last time anyone saw Cari Farver alive was November 13, 2012. She'd spent the night with Krupa, and he gave her a kiss as she left for work. But she never returned. A few hours later, however, Krupa received an odd text from Farver. She told him she wanted to officially move in with him, despite the fact that they'd just discussed keeping things casual. He politely declined, and he received an angry message in response. He recalled to Oxygen's Dateline, "Secrets uncovered as soon as I text her back. I get a text back that says, 'Fine. I don't ever want to see you again. Go away. I'm dating somebody else. I hate you.' On and on and on." Farver's family started receiving texts as well. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, got a message from Farver saying she had moved to Kansas for a new job and would get in touch to make arrangements about picking up her 15-year-old son, Max. Rainey thought this was strange, but when Farver missed her half-brother's wedding and her father's funeral, she knew something was dreadfully wrong. Authorities reportedly tried to get in touch with Farver, but when they received messages from her number asking them to leave her alone, they dropped it. Ronnie also told them that Farver had previously been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so investigators assumed she'd stopped taking her medication and vanished of her own accord. It would be years before they realized how wrong they were. On August 17, 2013, Liz Golyar called Dave Krupa in a panic. For months, the two had bonded over the threatening messages they were both receiving from Cari Farver, but now things had seemingly escalated. Golyar said her house had been set ablaze and her beloved pets had perished in the fire. Krupa soon received a text from Farver's number that read, "I am not lying. I set that nasty bit house on fire. I hope the bit and her kids die in it." Krupa also started receiving texts outlining exactly what he was doing or what he was wearing at the moment. Some of these messages would come in while he was in the same room as Golyar, and could see that she wasn't using her phone at the time, so he had no reason to suspect she was behind them. When Krupa changed his phone number, the messages abated for a while. In February 2015, he moved to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and he stopped spending as much time with Golyar. It was around this same time that detectives finally began digging deeper into Cari Farver's odd disappearance. In the spring of 2015, detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty of the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs started a full-blown investigation into Farver's whereabouts, according to Distractify. They suspected she was dead, but they weren't sure when or how she died. Investigators had searched Cari Farver's abandoned car shortly after her disappearance. But when they checked it again more thoroughly in 2015, they found bloodstains beneath the fabric of the passenger seat. They downloaded the contents of Krupa's and Golyar's phones for their investigation, and digital forensics discovered something odd. Golyar's device showed evidence that she had photos of Farver's car, 20 to 30 fake email accounts, and an app that allowed her to schedule text messages to be sent at a future time. The detectives zeroed in on Golyar, and when she suspected that they might be onto her, she told them that she thought Krupa's ex-girlfriend Amy Flora had killed Farver and had been the one harassing them all along. Shortly after that very conversation, Golyar called 911 from Big Lake Park in Council Bluffs, saying Flora had shot her in the leg. Unbeknownst to her, Flora had a solid alibi. Golyar's story began to unravel, but the final nail in the coffin came when detectives searched her tablet. On the SD card, police found thousands of deleted images, including one of Cari Farver's decomposing body. Golyar had stabbed Farver to death in her own car on or around November 13, 2012. She then spent 3 years sending 15,000 emails and up to 50,000 text messages, posing as Farver to cover her deadly crime. She even burned down her own house, killed her pets, and shot herself in the leg to carry out her lies. In 2017, Liz Golyar was convicted of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dave Krupa was left stunned by how the investigation unfolded. He said of the ordeal, "I want Liz to go away and never do this to anybody again." A Russian-born woman has been sentenced to 21 years in a U.S. prison for trying to kill her American look-alike with poisoned cheesecake and then stealing her identity. Viktoria Nasyrova, 47, was found guilty of attempted murder by a New York jury in February 2023. On August 28, 2016, Nasyrova contacted a Queens-based beautician she'd seen a few times. A Ukrainian immigrant named Olga T. Vike pictured. Nasyrova said she was going on vacation to Mexico the next day and needed an emergency eyelash repair. The only problem was that Olga was not at work. It was her day off. Viktoria pleaded with Olga to allow her come to her house for an appointment. Olga accepted Nasyrova's plea, and when Nasyrova arrived, with her were 3 square pieces of cheesecake. Nasyrova insisted Olga try it, and she obliged. 20 minutes later, Olga says she began to feel sick and eventually passed out. Olga's neighbor would later tell police he saw a woman come by the house the next morning with some chicken soup. After the woman quickly went up to Olga's room, the neighbor said the woman headed downstairs, cleaned the bowl, and left. After not seeing or hearing from Olga all day, the neighbor said he went up to Olga's room to check on her. He said he found Olga passed out in bed wearing lingerie. There were pills scattered on the floor and, despite the fact that it was summertime, the heater in Olga's room was set to high. He said he called an ambulance. Records show Olga checked into New York Presbyterian Hospital in Queens, New York, where she would stay for 3 days. The hospital performed a urine analysis and a complete blood count test, but both came back negative for any illicit substances. Olga was discharged on September 1st. After being alerted that Olga was ill, her sister, Irina, flew to New York from Ukraine. She contacted police. NYPD Detective Kevin Rogers received a phone call from patrol officers stating that there was a woman in a semi-conscious state who reported that valuables, including handbags, had been stolen from her room. Detective Rogers went to the scene and interviewed Olga. She told Rogers the last thing she remembered was her client, Viktoria Nasyrova, coming over with a piece of cheesecake that made her incredibly ill. She said she lost consciousness, and her next memory was after returning home from the hospital. Rogers was suspicious and wondered why someone would target Olga. He recovered the cheesecake container with remaining pastry crumbs still inside and instructed his team to bag it for evidence and testing. Rogers tried to find Nasyrova, but couldn't. After Olga Tesvik returned to work, another client told her she knew of someone who had a very similar experience. A few months earlier, a business owner in Queens named Ruben Borokov found a match on a Russian dating site who said she loved to cook. Her name? Viktoria Nasyrova. After the two arranged to meet for dinner, Nasyrova served Borokov a piece of fish. As soon as he tried a bite, he said he passed out. He said Nasyrova took cash, credit cards, and went on a shopping spree while he was unconscious. 2 days later, Borokov was still out of it. He said Nasyrova took him to his dry cleaning business, where his employees urged his sister to call an ambulance. Nasyrova fled, but not before taking cash out of a drawer. Authorities say nobody investigating Nasyrova for the New York poisonings knew she was already a wanted woman. In 2014, Alla Alexienko, pictured right, mysteriously disappeared in Russia, where Nasyrova was then living. Alexienko's daughter, Nadia Ford, who was living in New York, had looked into her mother's disappearance. Suspecting Nasyrova was involved and that Nasyrova had left Russia to settle in New York, Interpol issued an international alert for Nasyrova, also known as a red notice, but authorities were unable to find her. In early 2017, Ford hired a private investigator named Herman Weisberg to find Nasyrova. By scouring her Facebook profile, he found out she lived in Sheepshead Bay, a Russian neighborhood in Brooklyn, remarkably only 5 or 6 blocks away from Ford herself. After a month of investigating, Ford's hired sleuth was able to pinpoint Nasyrova's exact location, thanks to some amazing detective work. After observing the photos Nasyrova had posted on Facebook, Weisberg noticed Nasyrova was wearing mirrored sunglasses in some of her selfies. From the reflections in her glasses, and from other photos, he was able to find both the car she drove and the apartment building where she was living. On the morning of March 20th, 2017, Weisberg alerted local police to Nasyrova's whereabouts. She was arrested and taken into custody the same day. After obtaining a search warrant for the apartment where Nasyrova was living, police recovered multiple handbags, a ring, and multiple pieces of identification belonging to Olga TV. Rogers, alerted of Nasyrova's arrest, began reviewing evidence photos of items found in her apartment. After seeing the photos of Olga's ID, Rogers recognized there was a striking resemblance between Olga and Nasyrova. He says it dawned on him that Nasyrova was after more than material goods. She wanted Olga's identity. Rogers soon ordered the cheesecake container from Olga's home to be tested at 2 forensic labs. One of the tests came back positive for a drug called phenazepam, a potentially lethal sedative primarily found in Russia. Rogers learned that the drug's effects were heightened in a hot environment. Remember, when Olga was found in her room, the heat was set on high, even though it was a hot August day. The tests also revealed Nasyrova's DNA was on the container. The forensics tests convinced Rogers all the more that the attack on Olga had been a premeditated murder attempt. On February 15, 2018, Viktoria Nasyrova was already in custody when she was charged with attempted murder. At the arraignment, she pleaded not guilty. After Nasyrova spent nearly 6 years in custody, due in part to pandemic-related delays, opening statements were finally heard in the case against her on January 30th, 2023. On the 3rd day of trial, Nadia Ford took the stand. The judge limited prosecutors from going into specifics about the murder charges facing Nasyrova in Russia, However, Ford was still able to convey important details about her mother's disappearance to the jury. After an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury found Nasyrova guilty of attempted murder. Olga Tzvaik, pictured center with Nadia Ford to her right, later expressed relief about the verdict in an interview, saying she finally feels she has justice. Nasyrova faced a maximum of 25 years. More than 2 months after the verdict, Judge Kenneth Holder called Nasyrova an extremely dangerous woman. While announcing her sentence, Nasyrova was sentenced to 21 years in jail. With credit for time served, she could be out in 15 years. But authorities say after Nasyrova serves her time in New York, she will face deportation and a potential trial in Russia for the murder of Alla Alexenko. The husband of a Delaware woman, whose 2019 murder remains unsolved, has been arrested on a slew of assault charges after attacking his current wife and biting off her finger. Benjamin Ledyard, 55, has been charged with second-degree assault, terroristic threatening, and menacing in the New Year's Day assault on Stephanie Ledyard, whom he married in 2021. Delaware State Police say the new Castle County assault case is separate from the homicide of Ledyard's previous wife, Susan Morrissey Ledyard, and has no bearing on our investigation at this time. Susan's body was discovered on July 23, 2019, in the Brandywine River in Wilmington, Delaware. Her murder investigation is still active and ongoing, state police say. Ledyard, who has not been named a suspect in Susan's murder, was arrested on separate assault charges on Sunday and is being held on $77,000 cash bond at the Howard Young Correctional Institution. He is set to appear in court on January 25th. Ledyard was taken into custody on Sunday after New Castle County Police were called to the couple's home on Camp David Road in the Tallyville neighborhood of Presidential Estate. The couple had gotten into an argument over loud music, and he allegedly chased her around the house, swinging a pool cue at her, according to the police report. Stephanie Nixon Ledyard, 54, who had fled the house to call for help, was suffering from injuries allegedly caused by her husband. According to the arrest warrant, Stephanie told police that Ledyard had been drinking while playing pool when she asked him to turn down the loud music. The couple began arguing, and Ledyard told his wife, "Tonight, I'm going to definitely give you a good beating," before he picked up a cue stick and started swinging it at her. Stephanie told police that he chased her around the house with the cue stick and hit her with what she believed was a white square marble block with a black figurine on it, the warrant said. Ledyard then pushed Stephanie to the ground, grabbed her hair, and repeatedly smashed her head into the hardwood floor, she stated. Officers wrote in the report that Ledyard refused to speak with them. The court documents also revealed that Ledyard was charged in a previous attack on Stephanie last summer, in which he allegedly bit off the tip of her pinky finger. Stephanie told authorities at the Wilmington Hospital emergency room at the time that she injured her finger in a doorframe, and that Ledyard was with her. But she told police this week that Ledyard had bit the tip of her finger off and told her, "I think I swallowed it." Ledyard was charged on New Year's Day with first-degree assault. Ledyard's New Year's Day arrest comes more than 3 years after his previous wife Susan was found dead in the Brandywine River in Wilmington on July 23, 2019. Her car was found parked on Walker's Mill Road, about 3 miles upriver. Susan's death was not determined to be a homicide until months later. In September 2019, Delaware State Police said they did not believe Susan committed suicide, and said they were confident she did not enter the water where her car was found. The state medical examiner's office determined Susan's cause of death to be blunt force trauma and drowning. In November 2019, state police officially declared her death a homicide. Ledyard had previously told police that he went to a movie the night Susan was last seen in July 2019. He said he came home and went to bed while Susan stayed up texting friends on the West Coast. He stated that he was awoken the next morning by Delaware State Police looking for Susan. They told him they found his wife's car. Months after Susan's body was found, Delaware State Police labeled her death a homicide, saying she died from blunt force trauma and drowning. Susan's sister Meg Morrissey-Heinecke stated, "We want to remind the public that Susan's case is an active, open homicide investigation," she wrote in an email. "We will continue to do everything in our power to help get this case solved. There is a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Susan's family and friends love and miss her terribly, and we will continue to fight for answers." Ledyard's family has created the Susan Morrissey Foundation in her honor, which awards a cash scholarship to a student at Academy Park High School, where Susan used to teach before she was killed. Susan was an English teacher in California and Pennsylvania for over 20 years and loved sharing her passion for the written word, according to the Foundation's website. In June 2021, the Foundation gave out the first $2,500 Susan Morrissey Ledyard Prize for Achievement in English to Nicholas Manus, a student at Academy Park High School. Academy Park High School seniors Rodney Brown and Jenot Palamans were recipients of the 2022 Scholarship Prize. Detectives continue to seek information from the public regarding Susan's murder and her activities in the hours before her death. Anyone with information regarding this case should contact Detective Daniel Grassi of the Homicide Unit at 302-365-8441 or daniel.grassi@delaware.gov. Benjamin Ledyard is headed to prison for 2 years in connection with the domestic beating of his wife Stephanie a year ago. The 56-year-old Ledyard pled guilty to second-degree assault in August 2023. He was sentenced on Friday, December 22, 2023. The Delaware Department of Justice stated after his release from prison, Ledyard will have 6 months of Level 4 probation, home confinement, or a DOC probation facility, followed by 18 months of Level 3 probation. He is also required to receive continuing treatment for alcoholism. When Paislee Shultis disappeared from Cayuga Heights near Ithaca, New York, on July 13, 2019, her family was inconsolable. While police suspected that the 4-year-old had been kidnapped by her biological parents, who had lost custody of her, Kimberly Cooper and Kirk Shultis Jr., the hunch would take nearly 3 years to confirm. The now 7-year-old girl was found alive and in good health in the home of her biological father in Saugerties, New York, on Monday. Detectives had long believed she was being kept there, with prior visits typically resulting in Shultis Jr. Cooper and Kirk Shultis Esser providing limited access to the residence. Police finally obtained enough factual information for a search warrant on February 14th. They spent an hour combing the house before a detective noticed that the basement stairs were oddly built. Saugerties Police Chief Joseph Sinagra said both Cooper and Paislee were hiding in a small space within. There was something about the staircase that bothered him. The child never made a sound. Kimberly never made a sound. The question that needs to be answered is what she was told by her parents that would keep her so still and quiet while the cops are walking up and down the steps, while they're taking the steps apart. Before the kidnapping, Paislee was raised in the quiet village of Cayuga Heights on the outskirts of Ithaca. She experienced 4 short years of normalcy before Shultis Jr. and Cooper lost custody of her and her older sister. We believe what happened after that point was that somebody informed the parents that the older child had been picked up by the legal guardian and by county officials at the time, and that caused the parents then to take Paislee and flee, explained Sinagra. Authorities certainly suspected Shultis Jr. and Cooper from the beginning, and they would even receive numerous tips about the Saugerties home throughout their years-long investigation. Sinagra said that every visit police ever paid the couple, however, was met with adversarial claims that officers were harassing and badgering them. While they were admonished and told they should be looking for Paislee, the officers were occasionally allowed inside. This happened roughly a dozen times over the last 2.5 years. But Shultis Jr., his live-in father, or Cooper always limited any access to bedrooms or the basement. And since authorities did not have a warrant, they could not search farther. "We're bothered by the fact that this went on for 2 years," said Sinagra. "They lied to us for 2 years, including the father stating that he had no idea where his daughter was." The tables turned mere days ago when police received another tip. All the information they had previously received was hearsay that they were unable to act on. This new tip is unspecified. However, it contained factual evidence that the girl was hidden in the house. With the new information, the Shultis Police Department was at last able to obtain a warrant. Officers arrived at 4 p.m. on Monday to ensure that nobody left the property, and executed the search warrant to shocking results at 8 p.m. Officers discovered a room in the basement for the first time during their search. It held a bed that appeared to have been slept in, and Paislee's name was written on one of the walls. The homeowners denied knowledge of her whereabouts and claimed they merely had her room ready in case she was ever found. We asked, "Is she here?" And they denied that anybody was living in that house, in that particular room, said Sinagra. They said they had set the room up like that in the event that Paislee should ever return. Around 9 p.m., Detective Eric Thiel spotted what looked like a blanket after pointing his flashlight through a crack in the wooden staircase. Thiel and his colleagues began pulling the steps apart and saw 2 tiny feet. Then they pulled out Paislee. She had lain in the compartment alongside Cooper in silence for over an hour. After removing several more steps, the child and her abductor were discovered within, the police said. The space was small, cold, and wet. The child and her abductor, Kimberly Cooper, were found hiding in the dark and wet enclosure. Sinagra said this makeshift hiding space was probably used every time authorities paid Shultis Jr., his father, and Cooper a visit, with a door in Paislee's basement bedroom leading to a short hallway connecting to the compartment that appeared more than likely. Ultimately, police arrested all 3 adults involved. Cooper is facing charges of custodial interference in the 2nd degree and endangering the welfare of a child. Shultis Jr. and his father were both charged with the same crimes, but their custodial interference was classified in the 1st degree, and thus a felony. All 3 were ordered to stay away from Paislee. Alive and physically well, the girl was returned to her legal guardians. Fortunately for her, those who saved her stopped at McDonald's on the drive back to the police station. Police say the investigation is ongoing and additional arrests are still pending. On May 16, 2022, Edna Suttles, 80, a beloved mom and member of a tight-knit South Carolina community, was found buried on a remote wooded property in North Carolina. A single working mother, Suttles raised 3 children in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. At age 80, she worked as a home care assistant. When she failed to show up for an appointment with a client, alarm bells rang. Edna Suttles was reported missing from Greenville County in August 2021. She was a grandmother of 6 and great-grandmother of 12. She was the owner of a 1 bail bonding, making her the first woman bail bondsman in South Carolina. Federal investigators became involved in the search for Suttles, and a federal search warrant, unsealed in March, shows detectives found surveillance video of suspect Daniel Prince getting into her Jeep at the Food Lion in Travelers Rest on the day she went missing. The warrant said Suttles' belongings, including a purse and her Jeep keys, were found hidden in a bee-box on Prince's property on Kaiser Road in Rutherford County. In the bee-box, investigators say they also found rope, zip ties, and rubber gloves. In May, her body was found in a wooded area off of Harris-Holly Springs Road in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. According to a new federal criminal complaint that was unsealed, Federal agents say Prince has a prior conviction for kidnapping in Michigan and is a person of interest in the disappearances of other elderly women. Investigators say they identified Prince through his Food Lion frequent shopper card. According to the court documents, when investigators initially questioned Prince about Suttles, he told them he was a handyman and considered Suttles a friend, but denied involvement in her disappearance. In October 2021, a cadaver dog was brought to Prince's property and alerted to a strong scent of human decomposition on a vehicle panel from Suttles' car and Prince's wife's car, which they say he used in kidnapping Suttles. At Prince's home, investigators say they found pill bottles for cyclobenzaprine, tramadol, and lorazepam that were prescribed to 66-year-old Nancy Rigo, a woman missing out of Charlotte. A yogurt container found in the B-box with Suttles' belongings that was bought at the Traveler's Rest Food Lion on the day she disappeared tested positive for these drugs. According to federal investigators, Prince was captured on surveillance video moving Suttles, who was motionless, to his wife's vehicle outside the Food Lion in Traveler's Rest and wiping down Suttles' Jeep, according to the court documents. Federal investigators say that after kidnapping and drugging Suttles, Prince zip-tied her and suffocated her with a bag. When Prince was questioned again in October, he told investigators he wanted to come clean about his sins and would relay details to a defense attorney about the deaths of 5 different people. Dolores Sellers died at home in 2017 at 88 years old. She lived in Charlotte but was born in Loris, South Carolina. She had 2 children and was a wonderful mother, said Justin Holloway, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of South Carolina. She was beautiful. She loved to sing and reminded family and friends of Elizabeth Taylor. Investigators say they later determined Sellers was killed by a lethal dose of prescription medication administered by Prince. Sellers' daughter, Nancy Rigo, is also a victim of Prince. She was a massage therapist who lived in Charlotte near her mother. She will be remembered mostly for her laughs, for her love and her spirit full of life, Holloway said. That infectious laugh is what her family members will so fondly remember. Prince shot Rigo to death in 2018. According to the court records, Prince was listed as having power of attorney for Rigo's bank account, which continued to receive Social Security deposits and had transactions almost every day after her disappearance. All daily transactions on Rigo's bank account stopped after Prince was arrested, according to the FBI. Rigo's family has received emails from someone claiming to be her since she disappeared, but the person always declined to meet or speak with the family. Leigh Goodman, a mother of 4 and an occupational therapist, died in 2018 at 61 years old. Leigh's love for the beach was surpassed by her love for her children. She never had it easy, but she didn't let life's hardships get in her way. Holloway said Goodman died within days of meeting Prince. Law enforcement believed that by late August 2021, Prince had established an online friendship with Suttles. He went to Traveler's Rest, laced her yogurt with a lethal mix of painkillers, and placed the bag over her face, they theorized. On June 22, 2022, Prince pleaded guilty to kidnapping and murdering Edna Suttles. He also confessed to killing Leigh Goodman, 61, Nancy Rigo, 66, and Nancy's mother Dolores Sellers, 88. Prince is serving a life sentence without the chance of parole. On August 15, 2009, the tiny Middle Eastern nation of Kuwait witnessed the deadliest civilian tragedy in the country's history that would send shockwaves through the country. The tragedy would forever be ingrained in the minds of Kuwaitis and lead to one of the only times the nation implemented the death penalty on a woman. 23-year-old Nasra Al Enezi and her 36-year-old husband, Zayed Zafiri, were a prosperous pair with 2 children, aged 5 and 3. According to Kuwaiti law, men are permitted to have multiple wives, and in August 2009, Zaid Zafiri decided to enter into a second marriage. Nasra was less than thrilled about this, but did not have many options available to her, but to let it happen. Divorce is heavily discouraged and considered shameful in the Islamic faith, which the couple adhered to. On the night of August 15, 2009, friends and family members gathered to celebrate the wedding. In Kuwait, it is a tradition for weddings to be segregated based on gender, with the bride, her female guests, and young children in a private tent. The men would be close by celebrating in another location. On this fatal night, the female tent was packed with over 100 guests, dancing, eating, and celebrating with their loved ones. The tent was suddenly engulfed in flames, with only one exit. In a panic, the guests tried to flee, causing a stampede. Unfortunately, many who were not able to escape were trapped inside. It took only 3 minutes for the entire tent to burn down. These 3 minutes resulted in the deaths of 57 women and children, and left 90 more injured. The initial death toll was 42 victims, but over the year, it rose to 57. Many victims were hospitalized for long, agonizing months before finally dying as a result of their injuries. The bodies were so badly charred that authorities called forensic specialists to identify the victims. It didn't take long for authorities to realize that someone deliberately started this fire. They found their suspect to be 23-year-old Nasra Al Enezi. A witness at the scene, a woman who was later identified as Nasra's maid, testified that she saw Nasra pour gasoline around the tent. When police apprehended her, she confessed to pouring petrol and setting the tent on fire. The wedding that Nasra confessed to setting on fire was her husband's wedding to his second wife. In Kuwait, a man is permitted legally and religiously to marry more than one wife. Nasra's husband was celebrating his wedding to his second younger bride. Nasra claimed physical and mental abuse at the hands of her husband, and his relatives drove her to set the tent on fire. The authorities, based on the physical evidence and Nasra's testimony, labeled this arson a premeditated crime, with the primary motive being revenge. Both the bride and groom survived the fire unharmed. The initial reaction to the death of 57 women and children was grief, followed soon by anger. People were angry and demanded punishment for the person responsible. Nasra's lawyer believed that public opinion played a role in the trial's outcome, and the verdict was already decided by the intense public reaction. Nasra soon redacted her confession and claimed that she only poured cursed water around the tent, not gasoline. However, the witness testimony and the evidence contradicted her claim. Some sources reported that murder was never her intention, and she wanted to ruin the celebration. However, the tent's material was highly flammable, and the lack of fire exits caused this tragedy. The investigation concluded that Nasra instigated the fire intentionally. The verdict for the murder in Kuwait is the death penalty. A verdict was almost guaranteed in Nasra's case, since the investigation concluded that the fire was deliberate murder. While the death penalty verdict is common in Kuwait for cases of murder, the judgment is rarely carried forth for women. Another layer to consider in Kuwaiti law is the victim's family's right to retribution. The victims' families can waive their right to retribution and compromise with the accused in a court of law, which will remove the death penalty option. However, considering the high number of victims and nature of the victim's death, not a single family member waived their right to retribution. Another exception was pregnancy. According to Kuwaiti law, death sentences for pregnant women are commuted to a life sentence. Nasra claimed that she was pregnant with her third child during her incarceration. However, her husband's relative working in the jail forced her to take medication. Unfortunately, this medication caused her to miscarry her child. The husband's relative has since been transferred from the facility. Her lawyer hoped that her young age and mental state would make her eligible for a pardon. But the courts upheld the death penalty out of respect for the deceased, their families, and the survivors living with the physical and mental scars caused by Nasra's actions. Her death penalty was controversial, but not unsurprising, considering the death toll. Some believed that this tragedy could have been prevented by rethinking cultural norms regarding polygamy and the treatment of women in Kuwait. Soon after the tragedy, Kuwait banned wedding tents in the country, citing safety concerns. At the age of 26, Nasra was executed by hanging by the prison authorities on January 25, 2017. On November 29, 2011, Linda Kolman went searching for her husband after learning he had not shown up for work. She drove to the gym in Kingston, New York, where Tom Kolman worked out in the mornings. Linda found his lifeless body slumped back in the driver's seat of his sedan in the rear parking lot. The seat was almost fully reclined, and his pants were undone. It was in the Kingston Planet Fitness parking lot in Ulster County, New York. There was nothing in the car that would suggest anything of him being attacked, or anything obvious of physical trauma, said the detective. The car's location caught the attention of fellow Detective Brian Revy and Lieutenant Kyle Berardi. It wasn't parked near a building. That's the strange thing, Detective Revy said. If you're going to work out in the morning, you're going to park close to the building. I think we were interested, Lieutenant Berardi added. This whole case was odd. In Colorado, 1,800 miles away, Tom's ex-wife, Michelle Coleman Weber, couldn't believe that Tom, who seemed healthy, had died. Tom's dead, I couldn't process it, she said. Never crossed my mind that it could be anything other than something tragic, health-related. Michelle and Tom had been divorced for 12 years, but they remained close. They had 2 children, Jillian, who was then 15, and Bradley, who was 17. She had to tell the kids their father was dead. I didn't know how I was going to say it, so I just figured just get it over with, said Coleman Weber. Nearly 4 years later, in October 2015, law enforcement authorities arrested dentist Gilberto Nunez, charging him with the second-degree murder of Tom Kolman, in addition to forgery charges for possessing fake Central Intelligence Agency documents. Detectives had collected circumstantial evidence suggesting that Nunez killed Tom, who suffered from sleep apnea, with a fatal dose of the sedative midazolam. Investigators also speculated Nunez had an incriminating motive for wanting to kill his then best friend. Nunez, who was in the process of separating from his wife, had been carrying on a nearly year-long love affair with Linda and wanted Tom Kolman out of the way. The homicide, which made national TV news, shocked residents of Kingston, a suburban city 90 miles north of New York City. In 2016, during Nunez's trial, Nanny sat through roughly 2 weeks of testimony that included Linda taking the stand to recount the intimate details of her 11-month fling with the dentist, and his deceptive efforts to expose their relationship to Tom. The Kolmans and Nunez had children who attended school and karate classes together, which resulted in the trio striking up a friendship, Linda testified. After she began her affair with Nunez, she recounted, she began receiving text messages in early 2011 from a woman claiming to be having sex with Tom. Linda asked Nunez to help her verify whether the texts were authentic, because he had told her he was in the CIA, she said in court. The dentist provided her with a letter supposedly written by one of his colleagues at the agency, Linda told jurors. The letter allegedly confirmed Tom's extramarital affair, but also, oddly, advised her to forgive her husband. In July 2011, Tom learned about the affair between his wife and his best friend, but the love triangle continued, Linda testified. She also said Tom and Nunez became even closer pals, with her husband telling her at one point Nunez was the best friend he ever had. During the homicide investigation, detectives learned that Nunez had a burner phone he was using to send text messages to Tom and Linda, accusing both of them of cheating on each other. Nunez admitted to sending the messages, and he owned up to creating the CIA letter. During the court proceedings, prosecutor Mariellen Albanese laid out her theory that Nunes had become so obsessed with Linda that he created an elaborate scheme to break up her marriage. The plot included sending the text messages from a phony lover, the fake CIA document, and an email in which Nunes allegedly pretended to be his own mother, pleading with Linda to leave Tom. When his effort failed, Nunes decided to kill Tom, Albanese said. Albanese presented physical evidence, such as what appeared to be Nunes's SUV arriving and leaving the gym parking lot around the same time Tom was there, an internet search for midazolam on the dentist's computer, and 2 unopened vials of the drug found in an emergency kit in his office. Law enforcement officials had also twice exhumed Tom's body, finding traces of midazolam in one of his eyes during the second disinterment, Nanny says. The theory they ultimately came up with is that Nunes slipped midazolam into Tom Kolman's coffee, leaned his best friend back in his car seat, and tilted his head up so he couldn't breathe. Nanny says, "They clearly had a tough time making their case." Albanese did not respond to requests for comment. The prosecution's case against his client was weak, says Evan Lipton, one of the criminal defense attorneys who represented Nunes. Our argument to the jury was not only that Gil didn't kill Kolman, but that there was no murder. It was a natural death. The defense team called its own expert pathologist, who testified that Tom Kolman's heart was ready to burst, and that this was a more likely explanation for the death, Lipton says. Another defense witness, a pharmacologist, testified that the dosage amount of midazolam prosecutors claimed Nunes had given Tom wasn't enough to kill him, Lipton recalls. They failed to follow leads that suggested Kolman may have been meeting up with strangers, Lipton says, referring to recent emails Tom had received from a hookup website called Benaughty.com. We used these facts to undercut their argument that Gil is the only other person who could have been in the parking lot that night. On June 17, 2016, the jury acquitted Nunes of murdering Tom Kolman, but convicted him on the felony counts for forgery in connection with the fake CIA documents. The medical evidence presented by the defense that Tom Kolman had an enlarged heart muddied the waters about the cause of death, Nanny says. The prosecution was also having a difficult time proving Nunes was there at the scene. There was still reasonable doubt. As far as the forgery charges, there was no denying the CIA documents were phony, noted Nanny, who is now a Bloomberg reporter. The prosecution had called an information technology technician who maintained the servers at Nunes's dentistry office. He testified that Nunes asked him to pose as a CIA agent, Nanny says. Nunes tried to pay 2 people $500 to pretend to be CIA agents and have them approach Linda and Tom Kolman in the months leading up to his death. The same year he beat the murder rap, Nunes stood for another 2 trials on unrelated criminal charges of insurance fraud and perjury. He was found guilty in both those proceedings. In February 2017, Ulster County Court Judge Donald Williams sentenced Nunes to 2 1/3 to 7 years in state prison. Williams also denied Nunes's request to regain his dentistry license upon his release. During the sentencing hearing, the judge admonished Nunes as an individual who was consumed by an illicit affair, willing to do absolutely anything to promote his prurient interests. In 2018, Nunes was released after serving 19 months at Altona Correctional Facility in New York with a clean disciplinary record. Nunes is on parole until October 2, 2023. Lipton stated he remains in contact with Nunes, who had his license to practice dentistry revoked by a New York State Review Board, but declined to comment on the ex-dentist's current occupation and what he's been up to the past 5 years. In 2014, Nunes remarried a woman named Yamil, a real estate agent in the Kingston area. If you enjoyed the video, please show your support by subscribing and liking the video, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future uploads.